Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Be the Exception podcast. We have Brian Chambers here, Olympic weightlifting coach. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me.
For sure. Brian is going to discuss with us the top 5 mistakes that CrossFitters make while weightlifting. We're super excited to get into this one. He has a wealth of knowledge and has been teaching Olympic weightlifting for quite some time now. Brian, do you want to just give a quick little intro? Tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. The owner of Big Ben Strength. That's kind of my business there. I've been coaching weightlifting for 11 years now. Big Ben Strength's been around since 2019. Kind of started that as a as a gym right before the pandemic. Great timing, obviously.
Yeah.
But kind of around that time, I started posting some stuff on TikTok. Started blowing up a little bit there. And got into doing a lot more online coaching. So that's kind of what I do the majority of right now. Um, Around the same time, I started getting some success with some of my in-person athletes, like namely one of them is his name's TJ. He competed in weightlifting for a little over a year and a half with me. And in that time, he made 3 international teams. So he competed for Team USA at junior Pan Ams twice, qualified for Junior Worlds, got booked. We were ready to go fly out the next day, and he got COVID. He tested positive for that,
Oh
so we couldn't
no.
couldn't end up going to Uzbekistan for our World Championships, unfortunately.
Dang.
But it is what it is. And from that, working with everybody from state level weightlifters to high international level weightlifters, just kind of learned a lot over the time. And then in that process, I was also working with plenty of coaches as well who helped me out along the way. My main mentor was a coach named Glenn Penlay. For people who
Yeah.
don't know, he was a big deal in weightlifting for a
Yeah.
very long time. If you've ever done a 5x5 squat, you could probably thank him. If you've ever done a Penlay row, that's the same guy.
Yep.
So been lucky enough to have some pretty great mentors in my life, helping me get involved in weightlifting and be a better coach over time.
Yeah. Were you out at Muscle Driver then? Ever
No,
or?
I got involved with Penlay after Muscle Driver. So
Oh, okay.
he had some health issues. He had a heart attack at a big national competition. I
Oh,
think it
okay.
was around 2015, if I remember correctly.
Whoa. Okay. Okay.
And then after that, he had a lot of health issues. He moved back home to Kansas. And then I met him, I think it was 2016, if I
Okay.
remember correctly, 2016 or 17, I can't remember. And met him at his first kind of training camp, getting back into the sport again.
Okay.
And we did 2 training camps. It was a great time. They were like almost 2 weeks long for training camps, which is such a long time for a camp.
Wow. Okay.
It was
Yeah.
crazy. Those were some of the best experiences of my life. I mean, like, talk about like training hard. That was 2 a day workouts. We're going to
Okay.
max one lift every session. So,
Yeah.
an example of that would be like we're going to do a max on a clean in the morning and then like an 80% snatch in the morning. And then
Hmm.
in the evening, we'll do an 80% clean and a max snatch, things like
Okay.
that. And
Yeah.
so every single session was like that for just 10 days straight. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
And I bet you the energy was just so high all the time in there. Like,
I mean, he was able to craft such an incredible energy in the room, even though he's not necessarily the most high energy person.
yeah.
Something about him just makes you want to like really push yourself.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you ever watch any of the Muscle Driver videos at all or?
Oh yeah, the muscle driver videos. I watched a lot more of the Cal Strength stuff from the old days. The
Okay.
the golden days of Cal Strength, like
Yeah.
the Donnie Shankle is bigger than
Yep.
you. Um, all of those videos, just loved them.
Yeah, yeah. No, but Muscle Driver was definitely where I would like watch those before I went into the CrossFit gym to go hit some lifts, to be like
Oh
just
yeah,
get super motivated. Like those are
that's my
great videos.
favorite.
Yeah, yeah. Well, awesome, Ryan. You also, so I think one kind of unique thing is you work with youth in Florida, and weightlifting is actually a sport in Florida for high school kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's actually the only state that weightlifting is a sport in. You've got powerlifting in Texas. You've got some, I think in Missouri, they're trying to do like a power clean and a back squat competition in high school or something like that, somewhere
Okay.
around there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Florida, really luckily, like weightlifting is just a true sport here. So they compete in the snatch, the clean and jerk, and the bench press.
Okay.
It used to be just clean and jerk and bench, but over the last 3 or 4 years, they've added the snatch in.
Oh, Okay.
to try and help make sure that it flows into the USA weightlifting kind of space a little bit more.
Yeah. You think you're going to see a lot more kids from Florida that are kind of like talent level on the international stage for US because of that then or
Oh yeah, I mean we're already kind of seeing that,
okay.
but I think it's going to be insane because like I mean, there's some pretty big names that came out of Florida weightlifting, like Maddie Rogers. She
Oh
started
yeah.
in high school weightlifting here in Florida.
Okay.
And she was also doing cheer and stuff like that. But she came out of Florida weightlifting as a sport,
Yep.
and they didn't even do snatch, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing now more and more like the sport on the women's side is absolutely insane. Like we've got 30 girls on our high school team here, but every single one of those high schools is bringing a huge team with them.
Really.
And then on the men's side, it's getting a lot more refined. Like it
Right.
used to be kind of just it was mostly football off season was doing this, and now it's people are treating this like weightlifting is an actual sport. And they're approaching it like that. And so the coaching side is also getting more and more developed over time too,
Yeah.
and not just kind of like the old school football coaches teaching, but people that are legit very good weightlifting coaches are teaching, and I think the sport's going to be absolutely insane because of Florida weightlifting already.
That's so cool because it was like almost dead back in like 2009, 2010, and
Mhm.
it's come such a long way since then.
It's come such a long way. I mean, we have two things to thank for that. We have CrossFit largely. Like
Yeah.
I any weightlifter who says that CrossFit did not impact the sport of weightlifting is lying. It is. I mean, it'd be a dead sport without it, right?
Yeah.
But then I think Florida weightlifting is going to be absolutely taking that to another level, like a
Yeah.
second resurgence, because just the lifts that I'm seeing coming out of high school athletes, like there's a dude who put up a 385 clean and jerk in high school. I mean, what is that in kilos? That's like 170,
Yeah. That
70
that
or
video
75
was
kilos, something like that.
that video was
Um,
going kind of viral recently, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, there's just a bunch of kids out of high school that are absolutely crushing it.
Yeah. That's so awesome.
It's my
That's
favorite. I love working with high school kids.
yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So, yeah, I guess let's get into it here. We'll get into top five CrossFit mistake or top five mistakes CrossFitters make in their weightlifting. Pretty
Sure.
excited to get into this. I think a couple of these points, especially some of the latter ones, are really going to apply to a lot of CrossFitters and kind of give them some good bang for their buck in their training. So,
Yeah. Hopefully.
yeah, yeah. Sweet. So where do you want to start at then?
Okay, let's go ahead and start with the first one. This is probably the most common mistake, and I also want to say, like, guys, I'm coming at this from a CrossFit perspective as well. I coached CrossFit for about 5 years, so I
Okay.
have a good background there as well, not just kind of like some just weightlifting coach that's yelling at CrossFitters about how they need to stop calling it a squat clean. Like, I don't really care about that. Um, but we'll go ahead and go through these mistakes. I'm coming from a CrossFit perspective, but I still want to make sure that you guys are hitting the absolute best lifts that you can. So the first mistake that I see CrossFitters make, you guys probably relate to this, is powering more than you full. Whether that's a full clean, whether that's a full snatch, a lot of lifters, especially towards the beginner age or the beginner range, tend to feel a lot more confident, a lot stronger, can usually lift a lot more in a power snatch or a power clean than they can in a full variation, right? And so there's a few causes for this. The first one we have to go through is mobility. If that's an issue for you, right? If you're not confident or strong at the bottom of a front squat or an overhead squat, the chance that you're going to get there fast and with a lot of weight is very low. So we
Hmm.
got to address that mobility at some point. Usually it's best to try and do that as early as possible. And if you can do that and you have good mobility early on, you're really not going to have to push your mobility work very hard later in your career. You can kind of just coast off the mobility that you have. And honestly, like training the Olympic lifts will give you a lot of the mobility that you need for them, right? So we got to address the mobility. If you are not confident at the bottom of the squat, we got to get comfortable there, especially in the snatch. That's where you'll see a lot of people struggle. Um, Now, there's a lot of reasons that might be the case, and different ways to fix that. Most of the time, we're going to see issues in the upper back, the thoracic spine region being super limited in its range of motion. So, ways that we want to fix that first is just practicing overhead squats, doing them more consistently. It's one of those exercises that I think if you're really bad at, you should probably do a lot more frequently because one, you're not going to be able to do enough weights that will actually cause all that much fatigue for you. And two, it's going to lead to just more muscle memory, just a little bit more comfort, and that kind of stuff stacks up over time. And the other sneaky aspect of that I think people should incorporate is some sort of rotation of the upper back. The upper back is made to rotate side to side as well as flex and extend. So we're going to try and incorporate rotations in some way. A lot of the time that's like world's greatest stretch, doing some stuff like that, but you can load that as well, just it's not as necessary. So those usually will help the mobility. The next big cause of that, not being able to catch in a full squat, is almost always going to be a bar path related issue. So if we have the bar getting too far away from our hips as we extend, the bar it's going to be harder to get into that squat, right? Because you have to move yourself to the bar because it's far away from you, or you're going to have to figure out how to pull the bar back to you. So you're going to lead to some either loopy bar paths or really commonly a jump forward. So we got to figure out how to tighten up that bar path as much as we can. Drills are really great for that. Practicing the movement is just another great way to help fix that. And working on keeping the bar close. So not just keeping that bar close to the legs, which I think is where most people practice keeping the bar close, but keeping the bar close after you extend as well. Plenty of ways to practice this. I think probably my favorite is going to be a snatch from the power position or a snatch from the hip, right? Same thing from the clean. We can really work on breaking that movement down into simpler movements so that all we have to focus on is keeping the bar close. And we don't have to worry about making sure we get our knees out of the way. We don't have to worry about making sure that we're keeping our balance. And we just simplify things and go with the most simple approach. Now, one common problem with using the hip snatch or the hip clean as a drill to fix it is you'll do great when it's from that position, but then when we go and try and put it together from the floor, you won't see much carryover. So there's two ways that you can fix that. We can either do a complex of a variation from the hip followed by a variation from the ground so that we're trying to reinforce what we're using that variation for. Or we can use another progression, which is one of my favorites, called the tempo snatch or tempo clean. And that is a slow pull snatch and clean. 4 seconds from the ground to the power position before you extend is a really great way to make sure that you're not doing anything early in the lift that could cause that bar to go away. So that's kind of my spiel on mistake number one, powering more than you full. You have any questions on that so far? I know I
I have
rambled for a little while.
just like maybe a little bit of thought. So powering more than you full, obviously the sport is work capacity, right? And so when we get into CrossFit specific workouts, we're going to be forced to, or we would want to do a lot more power clean instead of squat clean unless it calls for it.
Yeah.
Is there, or sorry, power stuff. Is there some sort of way to offset that in your Olympic weightlifting training, or are you kind of counting that as more powering than squatting?
Great question. So I would say that the reason that most people are powering more than they full is because of metcons are almost exclusively going to be power variations. You just have a lot more practice with doing powers than you do fulls. So in my opinion, I think that most of the time CrossFitters would probably be better spent with their time doing full lifts and increasing their strength there because it is going to improve your power as well, right?
Right.
More than likely you should be able to full than you can power. So if we're not training our fulls very much, we don't have confidence with heavier and heavier weights than what we can power, then our ability to push the ceiling on the power is not going to be as high because we don't have the excess strength in the full variation to fall back on, right?
Yeah.
Now this is approaching this more from increasing your max or increasing your comfort in the full snatch or the full clean. But when it comes to for your metcons, I think you probably don't need to do that much more powers outside of your metcons because you're just doing plenty in your metcons already,
Right. Right.
Does that answer
Okay.
your question?
Yeah. Yeah. There's Yes, it does. It does. Is there anything you would do like if you do have like 30 reps or 60 reps or 100 reps of some sort of power position where it is kind of like throwing off maybe some of your squat mechanics or full mechanics? Is there anything you would do post that workout to just kind of re-ingrain or reinforce some more full mechanics or better mechanics afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how heavy you want to go with that. Like, how cooked are you after the workout that you just did? You can always take the empty bar and do some extra reps just from the hip and practice catching the full squat or maybe afterwards. It's not always a bad idea for CrossFitters to practice some like harder Olympic lifts after Metcons because that's kind of the demand of the sport a little bit.
Hmm.
So it could be a good idea to just spend 15 minutes practicing the full movements if you're worried about that. So I would say that that's really only a problem if you're somebody who knows that you power snatch or power clean more than you full clean and you're actively trying to work on it.
Okay.
Then it might be good to add in on those days where you've got lots of powers, add in afterwards a little bit of practice doing fulls just to make sure you're not adding up too many reps working the wrong pattern that's not your weak point.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Cool. You want to get into number 2 now, Brian?
Yeah, let's get into number 2. This one is a big one. I see this pretty universally, and that is moving at one speed for the Olympic lifts. Now, this I think is caused by just Metcon speeds, right? You're kind of used to cycling, and because of that, you're trying to control your heart rate. But when we're Olympic lifting, we're not really trying to control our heart rate if it's like a max lift, right?
Right.
But we're learning how to Olympic lift under a different stimulus of trying to control your heart rate. And also, you're trying to stay in a rhythm and stay in a flow without like getting too basically like without redlining, right?
Hmm.
So that can kind of lead to a different pulling mechanics in the snatch and the clean than you would ideally have in a max lift. So, what I always tell people is that in a max effort lift from a well trained weightlifter, the natural speed of a lift should be slow below the knee, faster past the knee, and fastest from the extension to the bottom of the catch. Better said, it should be fast below the knee, faster from above the knee to the hip, and fastest from the extension to the catch.
Hmm.
But for a lot of people who struggle with speed and with timing, that needs to probably be slowed down and exaggerated and mimicked with your lighter weights. So that's why I say slow, faster, fastest for a lot of people until you get to a point where you are maybe a more well-trained lifter, and then you can think fast, faster, fastest.
Hmm.
So with that, there are some ways that we can work on this. There's plenty of variations. One that I already have talked about is the tempo snatch and the tempo clean. Taking 4 seconds to go from the ground until you get to the hip and then finishing fast is great. You can also do different variations like a tempo to the knee. So maybe that's only 2 seconds to the knee and then fast after that. Those are great variations for that. And I want to back up a little bit on why that's so important. So let's say that you start the lift as fast as possible. The only thing that can happen if you rip that bar off the ground is that the bar will slow down later. So if you start fast, you will end up slower, and then you might have to try and regain some speed right around the hip. Instead of starting a little bit slower and building speed throughout the whole movement, that's a little bit closer to what you actually want to do. And a good way to think about that too is if you were to try and push a car, right? Like a car that's in neutral, if you were to just like back up really far away from it and try and run full speed into that car, you're not going to move the car, but you're absolutely going to get rocked. But if you start with your hands on the car, you slowly kind of peel the tires away, and then you can actually build up a lot of speed that way. That's kind of the approach that we want to have with the snatch and the clean and the jerk as well.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. So it's more so. Would you say that timing comes first and then start to build in the speed? Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that it's really like positions
Okay.
are what lead to speed, are what lead to timing, right? So if
Okay.
we are trying to go fast, what'll happen is you'll lose your start position or you'll lose your knee position. And when you
Okay.
lose those positions, you lose the ability to create speed. So the positions are what facilitate speed development
Hmm.
later in the lift. People hear that or see the Olympic lifts and they're like, that's a fast lift. I got to go fast. And they go fast at the expense of their positions, but they've got it backwards. Positions create speed. Speed does not come from just effort, right?
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Let's dive into number 3 here.
Let's do it. Okay, this one, probably one of my favorites. This is an old school problem. This is too much balance on the heels.
Yes.
So I'm sure that you probably have experienced because you've been around CrossFit for a long time.
Oh, this
The,
is this is probably the number one thing I harp on with people.
it's the worst. So it got real popular around like 2012 to
Yeah.
2015 to
Yep.
tell everybody to push through their heels.
Yeah.
And usually this was a cue given as a correction to a problem, which was people being on their toes too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? That doesn't mean that that wasn't a problem. It just means that they needed to correct away from the toes to the midfoot. But
Mm-hmm.
people are given the cue of pushing through their heels to do the opposite of what they're doing, right? They don't
Mm-hmm.
actually want you to push through the heels. They just want you to stop pushing only through your toes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or only through the ball of the foot.
Yep.
And so we kind of had a lot of people who took cues and corrections to one movement and applied that as the way to do all movements, and that's just not the case, right? Like
Yeah.
pretty much no athletic movement is going to happen with pushing through your heels very aggressively. Like you can anybody who's standing right now, you can just go ahead and lift your toes up and try and jump as high as you can. You're not getting anywhere, right? But the opposite's not actually true. You can kind of lift your heels up, like float off the ground a little bit, and try and jump as high as you can. You'll get very high.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what we're looking for in the Olympic lift. So we actually need to balance more of your body weight slightly towards the ball of your foot and the middle of the foot in the start position for the snatch and for the clean, in the start position for the jerk, in all of your squats. Really, we want to be pushing through the middle of our foot for the entirety of the lift. Now, this I think can come across as maybe a simple cue or a simple thing to fix, but personally for me, like I had a huge problem with being back on my heels too much in my lifts, and especially like in the snatch of the clean, what that would lead to is I would fall back to my heels as I got past the knee in the pull,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would have to compensate forward again to find your balance. And so what that leads to is this big shift back towards the heel as the bar passes the knee, and then this big shift forward again back to the toes as you finish your extension. And that's going to lead to that bar getting kicked away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So all kinds of issues kind of come from just over reliance on being too far back on the heels. So for anybody that does feel like that's the case, try changing your start position, rocking forward a little bit onto the ball of your foot, and then slightly back so you can feel that midfoot balance. And then try those tempo lifts, the tempo snatch and the
Yeah.
tempo clean, where you're emphasizing pushing straight down through the middle of your foot the entire time rather than any forward backward shifting on the heels.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You're talking about like the overcorrection because that's like that's a common thing that I use. I call it bracketing, right? Like so we see you doing one thing and we overcorrect for it in hopes that you come back to center and like we corrected the issue. But yeah, in that 2012, 2013 time era, like you give somebody a cue and that was gospel back then, and they're like,
Mhm.
"This is how I'm going to do everything now."
Yeah, a super common example of that is like in the internal versus external rotation debate in the
Yeah,
overhead position for the snatch, right?
right.
Where a lot of people were like queuing and really pushing like for hardcore external rotation.
Yeah.
And it works for some people, especially shorter limbed lifters, like shorter arm lifters. That might be a little bit of a better position for you. But that was mostly an overcorrection from people like having just absolutely terrible mobility and their like arms are pointed straight down in the bottom of the
Yeah.
squat. And you're like, don't stop doing that,
Stop.
But
Stop.
it's not that we want you to be fully externally rotated overhead either. We kind of want to be somewhere in the middle, maybe a slight bias towards internal rotation is my preference there. But it really depends on the lifter there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very cool. All right. Number 4. What do we
hmm
got?
All right, number 4. This one is the bane of my existence, and that is hip drive instead of leg drive.
Okay.
So here's how I like to think about this, right? Pretty much every CrossFit coach that I've ever heard talk about the Olympic lifts, they'll usually say like, use your hips, and we're back to kind of the overcorrection again,
Mm-hmm.
right? This was a cue that was given to people who were not making contact with the bar at all. But that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that we want you to slam your hips forward into the bar like a kettlebell swing, because that's only going to do one thing. It's only going to push the bar away. It will
Mm-hmm.
sound cool. It will make you think that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but it's not going to put the bar in the right spot, and it's going to lead to you having all kinds of issues like powering instead of powering more than you full, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so ideally what we want instead of hip drive is leg drive. The foundation of this though is bar body contact. So we have to have the bar in close to the legs and brushing the thighs all the way up in contact from about above the knee. It could be maybe a little higher than that, all the way up the legs And that contact is going to get you your hip contact, but it's not going to lead to leg drive. What that means is that when we're finishing the extension, we should see the knees and the hips extend at about the exact same time. What we shouldn't see is the knees staying bent and the hips fully extending before the knees ever extend or the knees never extending, right? So a lot of this movement should come from the knees extending. The reason that is it uses your quads, it uses your legs. Your legs are massive. They're the strongest muscle group in your whole body, especially your quads. If you're a CrossFitter, you got big quads. I guarantee it, right? We want to use those to your advantage. And more importantly, they're bigger than your glutes are, right? Your glutes are going to hip thrust that bar away, not the strongest muscles to do the job. Your quads are going to drive the bar up, much stronger muscles to do the job to get that bar high. And so we want to really focus on hip drive, not leg drive. Some ways that we can do that, I've talked about some of these variations already, right? Practicing from the hip, I think, is really important, especially if you're somebody like me who did it wrong for 5-6 years. You're going to have to unlearn a lot of those problems, right? So doing them from the hip, drilling that movement where you're focusing on extending your knees. I like using the cue like squeeze your knees or squeeze your quads to get that extension going. And then from there, piecing it together. Maybe you're doing it from the hang and feeling the same thing. And then maybe you're doing it from the floor and doing the same thing with a slow pull. Another great way to really work on that. Because there's all kinds of issues that could lead to that hip drive, not just the cue in your brain of like use your hips, but a lot of the time that balance back on the heel will absolutely cause some problems with that as well.
Yeah. So would you just kind of thinking about like some common things that are popping up here a little bit? Would CrossFitters just benefit from lifting slower in general, or?
I think everybody would benefit from lifting slower in general. I like to use I tell people sometimes, like, if you want to move fast, you have to learn how to move slow.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't do it slow, you probably can't do it fast. That's not true in all contexts. Obviously, like your ability to do a tempo squat is going to be a significantly lighter lift than if you're doing a full speed squat. But if you couldn't do a slow squat at any weight, that really tells me that you've got something going on that you're trying to cover up with speed. In the snatch and clean, that is the same exact thing. People will try and cover up movement problems or that gray area that they don't really know what's supposed to happen, kind of as you're passing the knee to extension. People will just go fast and black out. They don't really know what happened there. Practicing going slow through that portion where you don't know what you're supposed to be doing is a great way to figure out what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay. Yeah. I know speed was one of your other things, but it was kind of like, build the positions to create the speed.
Exactly, right? And that's the thing, like, going one speed is a problem. And that would be like if you're trying to go all fast or all slow, that's a huge problem if you're doing a max effort lift. If you don't know how to move slow with a very light lift, that's going to cause some problems too, right? So we want to try and use going slow as a way to make sure that we've got good positions so that we can build speed on that later.
Got it. Yeah, very cool. All right, number 5. What is it?
All right, so the first pull. For anybody who doesn't know, the first pull is from the ground where the bar's about mid-shin to right above the knee. Some people, it's maybe a little bit higher than above the knee, but right around there. This is where a ton of technique issues happen because it's the hardest part of the lift, in my opinion. Plenty of problems can happen. The most common one here is we're going to see the hips rising too early and the bar and the shoulders not coming with it, right? So we hear people call this like a stripper pull or something like that, right? The hips rising too fast, the shoulders not coming up with it. We do want the hips and shoulders to rise at the same rate, but another way to think about that is we want the hips, shoulders, and bar to all rise at the same rate. If we have the hips rising before the shoulders, the bar is not moving at all, right? You can watch that. You'll see somebody set up for a lift, they'll pull really fast, their hips will shoot up, the bar still hasn't left the ground yet. So now at this point, you don't have any quads to push with. All you have left is your back to essentially lift. Now, it's not saying that you're going to hurt your back doing that. It's just a less efficient lift. It's just a worse way to do it, right? You're going to use the weakest muscles for the hardest part of the job. So instead, we want to kind of go back to that portion in the beginning where we're talking about speed and try and slow things down off the floor. We want to try and move with some control off the floor and then build our speed, accelerate as we go rather than ripping that bar as fast as possible off the floor. Now, there's some other things that we can do to work on that as well. I think one, those tempos are great. Another one that I really like is a little bit more of a positional exercise, and that's pausing 1 inch off the floor and then
Okay.
doing the rest of the lift. I think people use pauses a lot in the snatch and clean, but I think that they tend to do most of their pausing like around the knee, maybe in the mid thigh area, or maybe just below the knee. There's a lot of benefit in pausing 1 inch or 2 inches off the ground because that's where so many mistakes are made. So using that as a way to reinforce the position that you want to be in and learning how to move from that position. Like I swear the other day, I did this. I had 1 inch pause cleans. I hadn't done them in probably 1 or 2 years, and did one and just was like, "Oh, I know how to clean again." That was incredible. Like it like clicked in my brain. I was like, "That's what I'm supposed to feel." Haven't felt that since, but it was one day like everything was just clicking. The 1 inch pause, in my opinion, is a really great way to work on that. But you can also do things like a pull to the knee, hold for a second, bring it back down, and then a full lift. Just get creative, like with different variations of the lift. And you can also do these as primers. I think that's one way to get some sneaky technique work in your Olympic lifts without adding all that much extra time to a session there is doing, let's say you've got like build to a heavy single snatch or build to a heavy single clean on your program for the day. Those first 3 to 5 warm-ups, if you struggle with your hips rising early, you can do those as a 1 inch pause plus a regular. It's not adding any more tonnage. It's just reinforcing the things that you need to practice, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So when you're doing like the 1 inch pauses, are you trying to, when you pause, recreate that good position? Like if you feel yourself out of place, are you moving back into it? Are you resetting? Like what are you trying to do with that pause exactly?
Great question. So the 1 inch pause, let's say that if you are ending up in a bad position at that 1 inch pause, then ideally me as the coach, I'm going to see that and fix that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And anytime that you're doing a pause, if you're not in the right spot at the pause is useless if you don't correct it. So it
Okay.
can be a good way to show you what problems you're doing, right? What mistakes you're making, if you also then will go ahead and fix it. So I'll use that a lot of the time in the jerk, where a lot of people will have issues at the bottom of the dip. They'll kind of lean forward too much, maybe they'll collapse, their knees will cave in, things like that. So I'll have people pause in the bottom of the dip, and then in that pause, the pause is as long as it takes to be in a good position. If
Mm-hmm.
it's, if you have all these issues happening, then let's go ahead and fix each one. Push those knees out to the side, lift your chest up a little bit more, make sure you're not leaning forward. Then once you're in a good position, I'll say go. Ideally, we don't have to do that too many times, right? Because that's really hard to hold those pauses. Um, but it can be a good way to, one, fix any positional issues that you might have. But
Right.
then two is just also usually if you pause there, you'll end up in a better position because you're being more aware of it because you're forced to.
Got it. Got it. So create the position, burn that into your brain, and then recreate it after every lift after that.
Exactly, and it just takes so many more reps than you think it does.
Yeah.
And that's a new lesson I've had to learn over the last few years. I, came from that Pendlay school of thought, which was like we're gonna go heavy in training a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and that means that we're probably gonna do like a 5x2 on Monday, and then we're gonna find a max on Friday, and that's gonna be the program like every day, every week, right?
Yeah.
That was good, but I found that I was just not getting enough lifts in to get really good at them. So something I've started using a lot more recently is like higher rep Olympic lifts,
Okay.
which CrossFitters are probably like, hell yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Um, we're doing things like 5 sets of 5 on a snatch, maybe four
Okay.
sets of 4 on a snatch, things like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to go a lot lighter in these, but
Mm-hmm.
if you do these really well, you get a lot of opportunities to fix a lot of different problems, and it's light enough that you can actually do that. But the cool part is, rep 4 and 5 of a set of 5 on snatch are going to feel just about as heavy as they would if it was a 3 rep max. They're going to feel about the same, but just because you're limited by conditioning or maybe a little bit of muscle fatigue rather than like absolute strength.
Got it. Got it. Very cool. Very cool. Well, sweet. Do you have anything else for CrossFitters, Brian? Or
Dude, I got a bonus here.
Okay, okay,
All
let's
right,
hear it.
so we've got a bonus mistake, and this is a programming mistake. So let's dive into
Okay.
some programming stuff because this is where a lot of the magic happens, right? So I've got a few here. We're just going to kind of go through these one by one. If you have any questions as I'm going through, just let me know, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so biggest mistake that CrossFitters make in their weightlifting programming. First one is going to be not enough frequency.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tricky one, right? Obviously, I recognize that you guys have to be good at a lot of different things in your
Mm-hmm.
sport. The problem is that beyond maybe some like more advanced gymnastics movements, the Olympic lifts are kind of the most challenging of those, the most complex and most technical of those.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not really going to be spending a ton of time working on your like box jump over technique or like your dumbbell snatch technique. That's
Mm-hmm.
engine stuff, right? It's not super complex, but you just have to get your volume in, right? For the Olympic lifts, we're doing them. I mean, from good programs, I see them most of the time doing them barely more than once a week, like
Yeah.
maybe once a week, right? If you're if you're doing the Olympic lifts once a week as a CrossFitter, you're probably doing like better than most people. I would love to see that more often, right? I think if you're doing them only once a week, you're probably going to have to spend the first 10 minutes of your session relearning how to snatch again, unless
Mm-hmm.
you've just been doing this for 10 years.
Right.
But if you're in your first 1 to 3 years of CrossFit training and you've only been, done a snatch once a week that whole time, every week you're relearning the lift.
Mm-hmm.
So you're probably not able to get much serious training in because of the time constraint. Let's like if you're in a CrossFit class, then the workout's usually snatch for 20 minutes and then a Metcon, right? And the
Yeah.
first 10 of that, you're like, how do I snatch again? And then the second 10 minutes of that, you're like, I think I get it. And then it's done, right?
Yeah.
So we
Right.
need a little bit more frequency, in my opinion, to get better at the movement. And that's just a simple way to get a lot better is just do the movement more often. Um, Professional weightlifters, depending on the school of training that you've come from, are doing snatch and clean and jerk like every day. Like they're just
Yeah.
there's two movements that we compete in. We're going to do them pretty much every day in some form or fashion, right? Maybe that means that we're snatching lots of doubles on Monday, and then on Tuesday we're going to be doing some maybe tall snatches or some snatch balances, like a different variation, but it's related, right? Wednesday maybe we've got powers, and they're a little lighter. Maybe they're from the hang or something like that. Friday, we're going to have a heavy snatch single. And then maybe Saturday, we're going to work on some pulling related strength issues like snatch pulls or something like that. But we're getting some work in that movement every day because they're so tough. Like they're done at the Olympics for a reason because it's like the
Yeah.
hardest lift that you can do.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a little bit more work than a lot of people think to get better at
Yeah,
those.
yeah. I always tell people like, look at a golf swing. Like professional golfers are still refining their golf swing 20, 30, 40 years into the sport. It's the same thing for Oli lifting. Like you're not going to get good at this if you're not one doing it every day and two not spending years working on this thing to really dial in what you're trying to do with these lifts.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the golf is a great analogy. We use that all the time when I'm talking to my other coach, Calvin.
Mm-hmm.
And he brings up a really great point too. Like you can work on your golf swing a bunch because it's not really going to add that much fatigue to you, but
Right.
you can only snatch 80% so many times in a day,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so you have to spread it out with frequency.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. All right. What else? What else for the bonus?
All right, next one. I think that CrossFitters seem to have an over reliance on variations of the lifts.
Okay.
And I know that that sounds a little bit trite because I have talked about lots of different variations of the Olympic lift already, right?
Yeah.
But if you notice that they all tend to be very simple versions of the full lift. So they're all variations of a full. We're going to be pausing halfway through, but it's still a snatch from the floor. We're going to be doing a slow pull, but it's still a snatch from the floor, right? I think that a lot of the times I see people say, oh, you have this technique issue. You're not staying over the bar for long enough. So let's do hang snatches. That could work, but also you might just be better off practicing snatching with the mental focus of staying over the bar. Now, if you
Mm-hmm.
get to a point where you're like, I need a drill to feel this, I don't know how to do this, the cues aren't working, visual demonstrations not working, then using variations as a teaching tool can be a good thing. But I think I see people doing things like snatch balances when they're snatching once a week. If you're just
Yeah.
not good at the snatch, like a snatch balance isn't going to make you that much better at the snatch unless you're already pretty proficient at the snatch.
Yeah, unless it's like a very specific thing that you're working on, like receiving that bar in the bottom position. Like you'd be better time spent developing that pull and really refining everything else in the lift.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, really commonly with that, people will program snatch balances to get people more confident in the bottom of the squat, but they're not confident in the bottom of the squat because they're pushing the bar away with their hips massively. So, like, we got to fix the root issue and not just address it with a variation that will make them stronger, you know?
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Um, I did. Okay, so this was, I guess, maybe a school of thought in the areas that I grew up in,
Sure.
lifting. But I remember there were a lot of people that said your overhead squat does not translate over to your snatch.
Mm.
Is that still kind of common thought or?
I disagree on that. I think that it's pretty clear, like, if you overhead squat more, your chances of snatching more are probably pretty high.
Yeah.
Um, I think that people don't do overhead squats enough. I think especially they don't do heavy overhead squats enough.
Yeah.
Now, funny enough, one thing I have noticed is that CrossFitters tend to have a very strong overhead squat,
Hmm.
um, but they don't have that carryover to the snatch because of their snatch frequency. So I don't think it's a
Okay.
problem with the overhead squat itself. I think it's just that you guys do a lot of squatting, and in particular, you have a very strong upper back, and you practice the movement of an overhead squat more than you probably practice a snatch. You know, especially a
Yeah.
full snatch.
Got it. Got it.
So
So
I think that there is carryover. It's
yeah.
just like how much carryover, right? Think of it as like the overhead squat is the most weight that you can do for a snatch related exercise. That's not a snatch deadlift. The next most carryover that we could have is a snatch balance because we incorporate speed into it. And so your receiving position on a snatch balance is the same receiving height as a max effort snatch. And so it's going to have a different form of carryover, but still relatively the same. That doesn't mean that the snatch balance is better for the snatch than the overhead squat. If your overhead squat's really bad, you should probably be doing a lot of overhead squats, and you will absolutely see some carryover to the Olympic lifts.
Got it. Got it. Got it. All right. What else? Anything else on this bonus or?
Yeah, let's go into okay. So the next one I've got is about progressions.
Okay.
I think that I tend to see CrossFitters do either very heavy Olympic lifts or very light Olympic lifts, and not much in that middle range. Now, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not in the day to day on CrossFit programming, but that's just kind of what I've observed. I think that I would love to see people spending a lot more time doing lots of heavy doubles, repeat triples, things like that, like just a lot of volume, but in that moderately heavy range. So I think an actual great way for CrossFitters, especially, is on the minute training,
Mm-hmm.
or EMOMs, right?
Yeah.
Um,
We do a
doing,
lot of cluster work as well. So
yeah,
1.1.1.
exactly. Those are great. I think that's a great way to do that, where you're getting high quality work because you only have to do one rep at a time,
Mm-hmm.
but you're going to be doing so much work in such a short period of time that you basically improve what's called the feedback to fatigue ratio.
Okay.
So if you're going to do, let's say, a heavy set of three, after the first rep, you get feedback on what you need to do for the second one pretty quickly, right?
Right.
Based on just how it feels. Your body's giving you feedback. But because of the fatigue, you may not be able to apply that feedback into a better lift on the next one. If the weight's light enough, you probably could. On
Mm-hmm.
the minute training allows you to extend the period of time where the fatigue can drop, but that
Mm-hmm.
feedback is still relatively high. It's still going to be dropping a little bit with that fatigue, but it's still relatively high enough to be able to apply good technique into the next one, right? So on the minute training is a great way to do that. I love that. And then, kind of in the same vein, of not spending enough time in that moderate range is, I think, just not enough long-term progressions in general. I'll see
Okay.
people do like, I'm going to do a 6 week snatch cycle, or, you know, a 4 week clean cycle. And in my opinion, I think that's just not enough time. Like when we
Yeah.
look at like on a weightlifting progression, um, a 12 weeks is like kind of the minimum that
Right.
we're going to be looking at, right?
Right.
For a movement. And so here's a really simple one for a lot of you guys. This is probably my favorite for the Olympic lifts. On snatches, we're going to do 1 month focused on threes. So that means that we're going to have 1 day a week focused on high volume. Sorry. 1 day a week focused on high volume threes. So that may be like 6 sets of three on week one, 5 sets of three, week two, four, and three, right? And then at the end of the week, we're going to build up to a heavy three. and we're going to try and add 5 to 10 pounds to that on both the high volume day and the heavy day each week. So that means that on week 1, you'll probably have to make sure you leave a little bit in the tank on your heavy triple there so that you can add some more weight to it each week. But that's going to help, set you up for a little bit higher work capacity. You're going to get a lot of reps to practice the movement. You can refine your technique. Then we go into the next phase. We're going to do 4 weeks of 2s. So maybe that's 10 by 2 on week 1, 8 by 2 on week 2, and so on, right? Drop 2 sets each week, early in the week. And then later in the week, build to a heavy double. Your heavy double on week 1 should be a little bit heavier than your heavy triple on week 3 of that first block, right? Yeah. And we build on that each time, add 5 to 10 pounds each week. And then we finally go into that last progression of 4 weeks of singles. And so maybe that's 10 singles on week 1, 10, 8, 6, 4, right? And you could even do those on the minute. That's a great way to help keep the conditioning a little bit up too. And then we'll do a heavy single on the end of the week, and we'll try and add a little bit of weight to that each time. So if you're a more advanced lifter, this is going to work well because you'll be able to build enough momentum over time to finally hit that PR at the end. And if you're a new lifter, you're probably realistically going to be able to take your 1 rep max for possibly a set of 3 in that first block. And then rather than retest your 1, you just kind of keep building that momentum. So your 1 rep max has gone up because you've done it for reps. You just haven't tested it yet. Yeah. By the time you get to that 4th week of the heavy singles, you're realistically probably looking at 20 to 40 pounds more than what you were doing before that. But that's because we've taken the time to actually build up a long-term progression where you're actually getting better. You're actually making changes to your body rather than just like squeezing out whatever performance you already had in the tank.
Got it. So what would you say to a CrossFitter who has crazy ADD, aka like 99% of them? It's like, well, you're telling me to do the same thing week over week over week for weeks on end? Like, what are you talking about? This is CrossFit, constantly varied.
How good do you want to be?
Yeah.
Like that's really it. Like I think this happens a lot in weightlifting as well. So it's not just a CrossFit problem, but people say like, I want to be really good at something. And also I want to be constantly varied. If you have a weak point, you have a weak point. And that even if you're trying to train constantly varied, you can be constantly varied and still weak in one area. So to me, it makes no sense to be constantly varied and ignore a weak point. Yeah. That's it. Like and you see this like with Matt Frazier. Matt Frazier approached his CrossFit training like a weightlifter does because he had a weightlifting background. If anybody's read his book, I mean, it's fantastic. He will go through a season, find out what his biggest weak points were, and spend the entire next year working on his weak points. And then suddenly they're not a weak point anymore. He never had an issue with the pig flip after the that second game that he got second at. And then when he had that bad deadlift event one year, the next year he came and added like 60 pounds to his deadlift. But he went out and hired Chad Wesley Smith, one of the best deadlifters in the world, to teach him how to deadlift and program deadlifting for him, and he got better at it, right? And so he is probably the definition of the fittest person on the planet. Why do you think that like, a low level, like, doing all the qualifiers, but like maybe not, actually qualifying for anything, should be training in a different way than the fittest man on earth? Yeah. Not saying that you should be doing the exact same thing as him, but I think that there's absolutely some lessons to be learned from him where like, yeah, you can train constantly varied, but also like don't neglect your weak points.
Yeah. No, love it. So, what else we got?
I would say like I think we could probably end it there. I think that's a good point right there. I've got some more. I'm sure anybody's got questions on programming, just leave a comment. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. Thanks for coming on, Brian. I think this is going to be super beneficial for people to listen to this one. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you guys follow me pretty much any platform: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I'm all around. It's Big Ben Strength. If you guys want to check out my podcast, it's the Last Set Best Set podcast. We talk just about weightlifting. So if that's your thing, you guys can check that out as well.
Yeah, you guys just recently had Max Aida on. That one's a great listen. So
Dude, that was a dream come true talking to Max Aida because he was like he was the one I listened to on podcasts all the time. So to be
yeah,
able to
right.
interview him, hear those crazy stories was really cool.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you haven't liked yet, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
All right, catch ya. Bye.
Bye.